Hello and welcome to today's video. Today I wanted to have a very important talk around one of my favorite subjects ever, and that is automations. And don't worry, we are going to be including AI into this conversation, but today I wanted to have a very important topic around what are automations and how do you get to using them. And if you've been on YouTube and you're in the space, you know that this is a very, very popular topic. As someone who has been in the automation space for 15 years now, I would admit that I think that a lot of the content on YouTube is actually not helping in the best way that it could. Now, I will be completely honest here. I'm being a bit biased, but I'm not. A lot of the YouTube videos I see, I don't think they really help with teaching automations. They just hype them up more and more each time. So today, because I've been wanting to make this video for a long time and it's been overdue, and I've also had a plethora of clients and people who I've consulted would ask me to make a basically beginner video on automations. And to be very, very clear, I don't think that I personally can make any more content about automations and or AI without putting out the basic and fundamentals because it just does not work in the long run for you guys. So I hope that this video will be very helpful. If you watch it towards the end, please leave a comment and let me know if it's valuable. I appreciate it a lot and I apologize for the delay. So let's get right into it. My name is Tylen Miller. I'm also known as Chowder. That's actually my middle name. And I will be your mentor for this very brief video. I'm the founder of a company called Otaku Solutions, and I specialize in educating, consulting, and building automations with and without AI. I have been in the automation space going on 15 years now, since last week, which is actually quite crazy to say, and we'll touch on that in a little bit. My background, I created my first automation in 2008. I want to specify something here that I think is really important. I glance over it a little bit, but I do not know any code whatsoever. Now, I also want to specify that everything we're talking about today is not code whatsoever. But there seems to somehow be some distinction that people try to correlate when it comes to automations and code. We'll touch on that a little bit later. Anime, skateboarding, and technology are the three things that I cherish. They have saved my life. That is an entirely different story. I have also created over 3,000 custom GPTs, and I've created my own what's called a WordPress as a service. If you want to know more about me, in this page that I'll be sharing, I've included some other interviews um, that with some very special people, some very special friends that have helped me do other amazing things in the AI and automation space as well. Who is this video for? Well, first off, this video is for anyone who is looking to learn about automating anything, their business, their personal life, artificial intelligence, music, customer support, IT, marketing. It doesn't matter what it is. You are someone looking to learn automations. Now, I am going to break this down into two groups, two of the most common groups that I see, and that is what is called a builder or an operator or a dev. And that is someone who really wants to learn how this works. They want to know the in and outs. They want to build. They don't have a problem building. They don't have a problem troubleshooting, etc., etc. And then you have somebody on the other side who may be a marketer or they may be a CEO, they may be a salesperson, right? And this person understands the importance of automation. They may even know how to automate at a very basic or beginner level, but they are not the builders, right? They're not taking the time to troubleshoot problems and build things and do all these things, but they do know how it works and they can give incredible feedback. Usually that's a marketer, to be quite honest. They can definitely be another role in the company or organization, but usually there's two it boils down to two clear lines. It's either you're a builder or you're a marketer. That's who this video's for. Anyone looking for knowledge, information, or a different perspective on how to get in automations, or maybe look at it in a different perspective. And if I was to break down those two into actual categories, they're usually called builders or they're called marketers. Now, why this video was created and why I think it's critical for builders and marketers? Well, one, I believe that there is a giant gap in the content that talks about automation today, for sure. I also think that if people really actually knew the basics and understood the basics, they would be able to progress at a much faster rate than that they think they should or could, if that makes sense. Also, the mental mindset of learning something new, such as automation, which is actually a couple of things put together, I do not see this talked about in any capacity. And it might be because I don't think that a lot of the people who make content on automation may be thinking about some of the things that I'm thinking about. And that's in no way to say that I'm better than them or smarter than them. I just have a very weird way of thinking. And to tie this all in, I want to try to give the best analogy I can. If you've ever heard of give a man a fish and you feed him for a day, teach a man to fish and you'll feed him for a lifetime. And I feel like this quote is the literal representation of my journey in automation 15 years ago. I started my journey in high school automating things in my personal life. And it actually started with me wanting to basically automate anime posts that I liked on Twitter. I found out about a platform called IFTT, and from there, it was off to the winds. I can't even explain it. But in that process, I actually took the time to learn what it was that I was doing. And to be honest, back then, it's quite funny because it was nowhere like how content is produced today. Of course, that platform put out content and other things, but were there communities and so many people that were into automations and AI and kind of was I even thinking about content and all these other things? Like, to be honest, it was not what it was today. I am self taught in everything that I know, either through YouTube videos or actual experience from taking on a project or a job or working on a project or a job where that experience, right, that resulted in like valuable information and things that I can use later on. So basically what I'm saying is I learned the basics and fundamentals of automations, and for the last 15 years that has allowed me to make over six figures in income every year. It has allowed me to never feel left behind in what's going on in technology. It has allowed me to almost be in every aspect and caveat of technology that I wanted to be in because they all are built on APIs, basically, which is what we'll get into later. And I think this is kind of what's missing. And I want to make one thing very important that I said earlier. I'm also a consultant. I'm a part of many communities. I have many clients on the small business side that has nothing to do with people learning automation, and another side where it has to do with people who want to learn automation. And those people come and talk to me and they tell me that they feel as if something is missing. And this is kind of the gist of how they feel about the content on YouTube. The content is amazing. It's great. There's resources, there are templates, but because most of this content does not touch on the basic building blocks of automation, that's the term that I'm going to use, a lot of people feel lost later on. And I would even argue that that is a recipe for failure later on, because if someone doesn't know the basics of how it works, they won't understand why you made certain changes to this automation. And that's important because we know that in the world of automation, you can build the same automation many different ways, right? And that might not be, like, the person who is just learning automations might not know about that, but it is very important. So next, I want to learn about what we're going to learn about in detail, and I think I tried to put this in the best order that I could, going over this video multiple times. We're going to talk about APIs. We're going to talk about HTTP requests. We're going to talk about data formats. We're going to talk about server responses. We're going to talk about webhooks, and we're going to talk about automation platforms. And this, I believe, in a nutshell, is a great beginner introduction into learning automations and artificial intelligence, whether you use just automations by itself and or automations with AI. So let's get into it. First, we're going to talk about a brief history of APIs. So this is a chart, which is a very interesting chart, which kind of shows the timeline of APIs. And if you don't know what API stands for, it stands for Application Programming Interface. And it's basically, this is basically a timeline, right, from 2000 to 2020. Now, that's a long time. If you look at this timeline, we see Salesforce and eBay's were kind of the first people kind of getting into this API landscape. Then we have Facebook, we have APIG, we have Shopify and Twitter coming in around after 2005, and then the time that I got into the space was around Twilio, Stripe, Google Cloud. It was around like a 2008, 2009 type-ish thing. The reason I'm showing this is just to show that APIs have been here forever. Let me take that back. Forever is not a good word. They've been around for a very long time, 20 years, right? Of course, information just in general, we all don't know everything. We all learn new things every day, and depending on what we're doing, may lead us into this new discovery. I just want to show this timeline though. And then here's another chart of just number of integrations at the top SaaS companies. If you don't know what SaaS means, it stands for software as a service. And most platforms, regardless if they're software as a service or not, have APIs, which we are going to get into. So, what is an API? API stands for Application Programming Interface. It defines a set of rules and protocols that allows one software application to communicate with another. APIs are used to request and exchange data between systems. So let's try to throw this in layman terms. If I have a software that I created, doesn't matter what it is, it's in English, and my friend created a software, doesn't matter what it is, and it's in Spanish, APIs allow my English speaking software to talk to his Spanish speaking software regardless of anything else in between, because they can follow these set of rules with one another. So as an analogy, an API can act as a messenger, enabling secure communication between software systems, right? API applications can send requests, then the API processes that request, and then the server will send a response, right? APIs connect different systems for seamless data flow and automation, and APIs also enable developers to build complex apps without starting from scratch, basically, because we're following the rules that were already set by this company and other things like that. Now, when we talk about when we talk about an API, right? It's also known as an HTTP request. And just really quick, an API is literally a URL. So if you've ever looked at your search bar, if you're looking in your search bar now, if you just simply know what a website is, that is literally what an API is, and I'll get to that a little bit later. But I had mentioned rules that APIs follow or HTTPS requests follow, and we're going to talk about the four most basic and common. We have and all of these sound like how they look or how they sound, and I say that because I think that like this some aspects of learning automations are so simple that they can just fly over our heads sometimes. So like the analogy I like to use kind of is like think of your phone, right? Let's just think about our phones for a minute. And let's think about the contact aspect of our phone when we are dealing with contacts, right? What are we able to do? If we want to call somebody, we're able to get a contact, right? And get that information about that contact. If we want to create a new contact, that would actually follow under a post, which means create or send data to, right? So we pull out our phone and we pull up the screen and then we insert the information. And when we press done, that actually sends what's called a post request to the Apple server or Android server to say like, hey, this is a file in this phone, like create this file and save it so we can go back later and get the information, right? And then we have a put and patch, and this basically means just update. It just means update whatever information that you have, and then we have a delete. And this basically sounds like what it means is that we're going to delete information or data. And I want to keep this simple. Once again, think of it when you think of an API request, if you're new. If you're not new, I can't think of an analogy, so I'm sorry right now. But if you're new, just think of your phone, right? Think about when you want to add someone, you're making an API call, right? When you want to update that contact, that's an API call. When you want to delete that contact, that's an API call. You're following a set of rules. And we'll get into the rules a little bit later. Right now, we're just talking about the type of rules. One type of rule is getting information. One type of rule is creating or sending information. Another type of rule is updating information. And another type of rule is deleting information. Now, along inside of an API, and we're going to go look at an API in a little bit, don't worry. Inside of an API, we have a header, right? And basically, a header inside of an API, right? Headers are metadata sent with API request or response. They include information about the request, such as the content type, authentication token, sorry for that terrible English, authentication token, and cache control. Now, there are three things here, and don't worry, all this is gonna make sense a little bit. We have a data format, we have authentication, and we have a response definition. Now, once again, please remember, APIs follow a set of rules, and in these rules, an API may have, not all, may have something called a header. What is a header? A header is very simple. A header is kind of like telling it's like telling what is needed in the API request. So normally in a majority of API calls, well APIs, you need a header. And the header is going to be protected by something called a token or a bearer token. And that serves as your authentication. It's actually your password. So let's touch into that really quick. When you use almost any platform or any software, they're going to have API. And when you go to this API, it's going to be documentation and it's going to let you know how to make a request or a call to this API. And you got to know the data format and you got to know authentication. Now, most of the data formats, what we're going to talk about a little bit later, is called JSON. That is the most known and normal standard of how data is read by humans and computers. Then you have authentication. And once again, that basically means like if you make an API request, you need to make sure that your authentication or your password is set up correctly. Because if it's not, that means you can't log in, you can't verify yourself basically, right, to this platform. Like this is my account. So basically, the API is not going to work. Next, we have properties. And properties are basically kind of like, I want to call them the settings inside of what I called a JSON or an API call. And basically, what happens is when we make this API call, we need to send information. And this information, all of the time, needs to be in a certain format. It needs to look a certain way. So it's basically going to be able to be read by humans or computers, whatever the case is. Um, and this is normally known as a key pair value. And if you think of key and pair, like when you think of key, like a key goes into a lock and it opens it and it does this stuff, and like a pair is like these two things. Like it's two, but it's technically one. Basically, let's go with that one. Let's forget the key part. Let's stick with the pair, right? And basically, what a key value pair is in a property of a JSON is basically like information or settings. It could be name, it could be email, it could be phone number, it could be a plethora of things. And then you also have something called a query parameter, which we'll get into a little bit later. And that basically allows you to filter data that you want to receive or send to make an API call. So instead of like a pair of shoes that have information, that you can use like as a property. You can use information to filter in a query parameter. And trust me, we're gonna get into this a little bit later. It's so simple and easy. I promise you. It's like almost laughable, which is kind of crazy to say. Next, we have something called a JSON or a JSON object. And I have two pictures here. I apologize for the one to the right. That's kind of zoomed in too far. But first, we're going to talk about a JSON data format. And this is very important because one thing that I think hurts a lot of people is not fully understanding the platforms or technology that you use. Now, what I want to make very clear is that JSON, JavaScript object notation, is a lightweight human readable data format used to exchange information between systems. And this is kind of the standard in the software and technology world. And I actually don't want to say kind of, it actually is the standard. Almost every application that you see will be able to read JSON because, once again, it's not code, it's just data formatted in a way that is easy for me and you as a human to read and also a computer to read, which isn't tied to a specific programming language such as JavaScript or Python or Node.js or whatever the case may be here. So actually, if we scroll down, we see a JSON data format is typically structured as a series of key value pairs. So remember what I said earlier, pairs are like matching things up together, right? Structured as a series of key value pairs within curly brackets. It can contain nested object or arrays. And basically, nested means like information within information, kind of like a subfolder, if that makes sense, right? That information is nested. So if we look at this picture here, once again, we can see, very simple examples of key value pairs. Here you have a name, which is the key, and then the value would be the person's name. Here you have the age, right? And then the value would be the person's age. Here you have the key, which is the email, and the value would be the person's email, and so forth and so on. Inside of an address, this looks a little different, right? But an address has many things like a street, a city, or a state. So what happens is like it just gets nested inside of that information. And then we have a JSON object, which refers to the specific key value pair within the structure. And it can also be used as part of a larger JSON data format on its own, which looks like this. So something very simple. If you kind of take a look at this type in mobile number here, it's no different than the name and age here. and that is JSON, which is very important. Once again, a lot of people see this and get scared, and all it is an easy way for you to be able to read this information and a computer to be able to read this information as well. The next part we have about an API is the body or the payload. And this is where we actually send information, or we put information in here that is going to be used for the actual API call. There's going to be data processing, so the API uses the received data to perform the action or update the resources. So, for example, somebody fills out a form, I take that information from the form and send it somewhere, like to create a new record inside of my database, as an example. And then we also have something called server response codes, which when we make an API call, right, we basically need to, like, how do we know that is good? And because basically everything lives on the internet, and if something lives on the internet, it has to live on a server. The server can send us back a response, and the server can let us know, like, hey, this is good, everything worked out. It can let us know that this is bad and, like, you need to fix something, or it can let us know that something is wrong on their end and they're going to fix something, and we can come back to that. And trust me, I'm going to go, like, visually over this, give some good examples if I can. So before I go on to the next part, let's actually go look at an API and get into this. And what I'm going to do is actually use a platform called Todoist, which is one of my favorite platforms. It's actually literally how I got into automations and stuff like that. And if you don't know what Todoist is, it's basically a Todoist project manager type of application. It's actually way more than that, but I'll just leave it at that for now. Now, what I want to mention is that when you want to automate a platform, you just need to go look for the API documentation. And literally, normally, what you can do is, one, you can go to your platform and you can scroll all the way down to the bottom, and they're probably going to have a page or something that says API, or you can actually just go type in the business name and type in API, and you will get the relevant documentation that you need to find. Now, taking this back real quick, because I kind of want to be very thorough with this here. So when we come back to, like, what is an API, one thing that I forgot to say is an API is literally a URL. That is what it is, and this URL lives on a server, and we can pull information from that server. So I want to mess with the Todoist API because I think it's very simple and very easy. And when I say mess with it, at least I want to look at some of this really quick. So if I come here into their REST API panel, this is going to have information here to show us as the user or developer on how to make an API request. Now, I'm saying a couple terms here, but I want to make sure these all stick. API stands for Application Programming Interface. And even though an API is a URL, you can use this URL in many ways, obviously. Behind cover, that was terrible. Behind cover, I'm so sorry, I'm sleepy. When you make an API call, you're going to see something called an HTTP request, and then you're going to also see something in other platforms called a curl. And a curl is basically a HTTP request. You may see other things like SDK. That's something basically you don't have to worry about because that means you're building an app or something like that. But a curl request basically means that it's going to be an HTTPS request. Now, there's a lot of information right here. One thing that, as we get further into this, it will make sense. If information may be a little hard to read here, which for some people it's a little bit intimidating, which I can understand, but definitely take your time. You can copy these pages and put them in ChatGPT to help you. But most of the time, documentation is sufficient enough to get you to where you need to get going. So this starts off with an authorization page. And what I want to do is come right here. And what we're looking at right here is this URL for Todoist. An API endpoint is the actual name, and we can see that this says api.todoist.com slash res slash v2 slash projects. And we also see something here that says authorization slash bearer slash token. So if we look at this, we can already go back from the slide that I had and kind of look at a lot of things that are going on here. We can see that this is a GET request. So we have that right here. We can also see that the authorization is bearer, and here this is a header because we see this H right here, so we know that that has to be inside of the header. It's authorized. It's asking for our password, which is our bearer token. And then this gives us an example of the response that we were to get back if we were to make this API call. Now, what this is actually doing, let me start really quick. I'm going to start on projects. And what this is basically saying is like, get all of the projects from what we are doing, right? And if you notice, you see this JSON here, right? Which does not look too different from what we were talking about here, right? This information was returned in a readable format that I can see this stuff here and then be able to make that API request and everything like that. Now, once again, I'm going to show this a little bit later, but I just want to walk over like the basics and fundamentals, right? So if we just backtrack a little bit, we went over like what is an API. An API, it defines a set of rules, right, that allow one software to talk to another piece of software. And then there's types of API requests, right? You have a GET, which retrieves information. You have a POST, which sends or creates information. You have a PUT, which updates information. And then you have a DELETE, which deletes information. Also, an API may have a header. And if it has a header, that header is basically saying, here is the password that's needed or required or verifying or authenticating this user in order to make this API request in order to get the data back from the server. Here we have our JSON object, which we can obviously see right here. This is, regardless, this is JSON, even though this is not in the body. We didn't put anything in the body or anything like that. I just want to backtrack and show how we can see all of these things here. We have the body and the payload. Now, what I want to do is actually go to another example. I'm just going to go underneath this and we're going to create a new project because this right here is the example response and this is from the server. So basically, to appeal or do whatever, we can't like that API call basically would not work, right? Because this is the response and we're not putting anything in the body. Now, if I go to this create a new project, if we look at the HTTP request, right? If I look at get all projects and I look at this and it says money sign curl dash x that get HTTP URL, then it has the header, authorization, bearer, and token. If I come to create a new project, This is the same URL, but it's a different type, right? It's a post type, and then they're doing something like sending data along with this. Now there's still H's here because this is required in the header in order to make the API call, and I will show that a little bit later. But that's very important, right? Because if you don't know that, like how this works with the header and authenticating or whatever the case may be, you would never be able to make the API call. And then we also have a server response code. And once again, whenever we make an API call or an API request, we're going to get information back. And that information can say successful. That information can say there's something wrong with the request that you tried to make. Please fix it. Or there's something wrong with our server when you made the request. Please give us some time. And to take a look at this, if I come back over into the overview, we can see here request and response format, and we can actually see the status codes here, which match up kind of to what I was showing on the slide. We see anything in the 200, it means that it was okay and data was returned. Anything in the 400 means that it was processed with an error. Um, and then, of course, with 500 is basically something was wrong with on the server side. So that is APIs in a nutshell. We still have more to go, but that's that there. And the next thing that we can touch on is what is a webhook. Now, just like in the beginning, I had said that APIs are a URL. They're probably your favorite type of URL, which is what you see here, HTTPS was that semicolon forward slash API slash Todoist, etc., etc. We've all seen URLs before. Now, to go on to this next part to make sure I explain the difference between an API and a webhook as simple as possible, is that APIs, once again, follow a set of rules and protocols tied to a platform and software, whereas webhooks don't really do that at all. Webhooks are mainly used for one system to automatically send real time data into another system when a specific event occurs. And let's just say a specific event is a person signing up for a software or a person issuing a refund or whatever the case may be. You would be able to actually take that information in real time and be able to send that, make an API call to another platform to have some type of automation go off and call them, or let them know that their services are still going to be going on, and whatever the case may be. Obviously, there's infinite types of things that can go on here. So definition, it's an automated communication mechanism triggering an action in one system when a specific event occurs. Applications send real-time data over the internet. A predefined event triggers a notification with relevant data. Adding a new customer automatically sends a welcome email or notification. And another thing about webhooks, which is very different from API calls, is that webhooks don't need an authentication or header, and we'll get into that a little bit later. But if I actually come back here, what I'm basically saying is, if I come to my authorization API, I'm sorry, if I come to my projects and then I go to create a new project, we see all of these H's here for the header. He actually does not require, well, the webhook actually does not require um, any of those things. It's just more straightforward sending data to, which I'll get to that in a little bit. A webhook, you can do something called structuring the data, which will let the webhook know what type of data it's going to receive and what type of format, what's that going to look like for whatever purposes and things like that. Now, APIs and webhooks are both URLs. I think that's one thing that may be very confusing to people, but just to make it very clear, the difference is that in API, you're usually requesting data or like you're doing something with the data, right? Those four rules. You are either getting data, requesting data, updating data, or deleting data, whereas a webhook can't do any of those things. A webhook only receives information. It can't delete data or do any of those things whatsoever. Next, we have automation platforms, which is probably, of course, what many people have been waiting for me to get into. Automation platforms are actually quite funny to me because I have been using automations for a very long time, like I've stated earlier. And the first platform that I ever touched was a platform called IFTT, which stands for If This Then That. I believe that came out in 2008, before I started going to middle school. And it was actually really crazy what that platform birthed because Zapier was kind of born from that platform. That was the next iteration of automations, and obviously, Zapier is the number one most known platform when it comes to automations and things like that. Now, I actually am a heavy Make user because I do have an enterprise account and I actually am a part of the Make directory, and I'm also a heavy N8N user because of basically paying $0 to host automations and build agents. I think is very great and beneficial for people. But just to get into automation platforms a little bit to tie in all of this together, because this is the last part before we start kind of getting into some things, is that automation platforms allow users to create automatic workflows with different applications without having to do any type of coding. And what happens is that there are pre-built modules for you to use to automate. So if you want to automate Google or Gmail or WhatsApp or whatever, you can go on those platforms and basically connect them and start sending data to them and doing other things. And if you noticed, I said that a lot of these modules are predefined because there are times, let's say a platform is created and they create API which has a set, let's just say like, um, let's say this API has like 20 rules. What normally happens in an automation platform is like they don't always add all 20 of those rules, they only add 5 or 10. And if the pre-built module doesn't have that API call, then basically what you have to do is go make an HTTP request in order to, you know, um, basically still automate that process. Just because there's no pre-built module there for you to use does not mean that you can't automate the process. Definitely write that one down or put a pin in it because it's something very important that is going to be like very helpful later on down the line. And basically what I'm saying is if I go to any automation platform and I want to use a platform on there and I see that that platform isn't there, that doesn't bother me or deter me in any way because I know that I can still automate and connect to that platform regardless. Next, I want to talk about like automations in a business, right? Because sometimes I think that it's so simple that it's easy to look over, and then it can also be vice versa. It can be like not really easy, and you look over like some of the things that you think that you would have like been able to notice and stuff like that. So when you think about a business, there's like eight natural normal parts to a business. You have finances, support, customer integration, IT, HR, marketing, sales, and product. Um, and I think if I was just to stick with support, marketing, and sales, those were to be like some of the easiest ones. But this is very kind of, at least for me, it's very kind of common when I think about this. When somebody comes and asks me about automations or anything like that, I'm always thinking about what section or what part of the business that can be automated. And really, really honestly, everything can be automated. And we'll get into that a little bit later. Should you automate everything, even though you know it can be automated and things like that? But this was very helpful for me because also I think what's happening right now in the space of automations is like there are all these new coin terms, AI automation agency, and all these other things. And I feel like when you say if you're an AI automation agency, you are basically saying you're this picture here that you can automate throughout any type of the organization. And why I think that's very powerful is because a lot of people get niche wrong. Um, they think niche is like the industry that you're in, but a niche is actually the problem you solve for an industry. So going back to the comment I made earlier, because I understand the fundamentals of automation, I am able to literally connect and collaborate with so many projects and get into so many things because like I don't feel left behind. And once again, like APIs are the building blocks for everything. So because I understand that, like I actually have the ability to jump into a lot of things, which is great. And I've had that ability for over 15 years, and it's never wavered or deterred or any year I felt like I wasn't going to be able to do that because let's face it, automations are going to be here forever and every business owner needs it. And most business owners still don't know that they need it to this day, even though what's going on with technology and things like that. I'm going to come to this part last, the process of creating an automation. Actually, no, no, no. I can come here because we kind of already did this. And now, really quick, if you're looking at this picture, it's going to say something about code. And I just want to let you know I took this picture from another picture. Once again, there's no code required here at all. But I think this is a very, very, very important picture because a lot of people ask me, like, Tyler, how do you go about building an automation? And what do you think about? And all these other things. And I'm going to make it like, try to make it as simple as I can. When people ask me, like, how do I create automations? One, it's very hard to answer that because, like, I've just been in it for so long. But I think I've really found one of the easiest ways. Um, and basically, what I do is when a client is telling me about a process that they want to automate, one, I'm immediately asking them about the software that they're using. And if I can, I'm in real time looking up the documentation for the software exactly like this, no different, to already play out scenarios in my head and do other things like that, if that makes sense. Um, and it's always worked. Now I think you guys like really have a cheat code because you can literally go to any of this and you can just literally like you can literally copy this and say like let's come here to chat GPT. Say, can you help me create an automation for building new projects? Right, we throw this right in chat GPT. And then this is giving us or walking us through kind of the order or what we need to do. Now, really quick, I have a lot of friends who joke with me and like they're like, I went to ChatGPT to ask it, and I want to let everybody know like, please don't feel any shame in doing that, and it's one of the best things that you can do, whether you use it for free or pay for it. Once again, I don't know, like I didn't have any of those things, so just please take advantage of them. They make things like way, way easier. Words can't even really explain. And that's actually the process of what I do. Not all the time I need to go into ChatGPT, depending on how the documentation is, if it's up to date. But literally, what I do is I'll go whatever platform I want to use. I just go to Google and I type in API, and I check to see what type of information that they will have and other things like that. Now, really quick, actually, I want to go back because I'm not sure if I kind of touched about this in automation platforms. Let's actually go into an automation platform right now, and what I'm going to do is actually go into Make because it is the most known and most popular and other things like that. So there's two things that I actually want to do. One is I want to show myself making an API call so you guys can see what's happening there. And we're going to do that inside of Make and then kind of backtrack like everything that I went over. So if you go inside of Make, we're going to have to create a new scenario. And once we create that scenario, we're going to come back here and we're gonna look at this API call, which is basically saying like get a user's projects inside of their Todoist. So actually, what I need to do is log into Todoist, and I'm gonna actually log into a blank account, so I don't have a whole group of things showing up in my main account. So I am now, oh, excuse me, I am now logged into Todoist, which is one like a really great platform. I definitely encourage people to use it. And if we look at my Todoist, we see I have a couple things here. We see I have download Todoist, take the productivity method quiz, and browse the Todoist inspiration hub, and then I have review upcoming exam dates and plan ahead. What I want to do is literally replicate what I'm seeing inside of here. And this is basically saying like, hey, I want to get all the information about a person's account. So with that being said, I need to basically like copy this information because he isn't gonna. Yeah, we need to copy this information, and then we're gonna come basically here. And when we're inside of Make, we're gonna need. I kept referring to this. We're gonna need to make an HTTP request, which is what you see here. And there's going to be a lot of options here, but what we need to do is just make a basic request. And if we go back to what I was saying about an API, right, we're following these rules. These rules are a URL. I've copied that URL, which is right here. The method, we want to make sure you have the right method. The method is get. And then I need a header and I need to put in my password. So here we see headers. I can come right here, and this is usually authorization. Just to double check, we can look at authorization right here, and then I need to add in the value, right? So that is bear, and then I need to come to Todoist and grab my API key. Oh, I wasn't supposed to show that, but I could just issue a new token. Oh no, did it log me out when I did that? Okay, well, that's okay. Could just log back in, I guess. So let's come back here. Copy token. The body type, right? This is very important. The body type needs to be most likely content application JSON. So we need to put this as raw. Don't think too bad. Now, JSON, there is no content request content. We're not requesting anything. We're just pulling information. A get, right? A get is just pulling. And then we need to parse the response just to make sure this looks good. And actually, what I'm going to do is actually unparse it because I want to show you like the difference between that. So if I press run, this should work. Now this is ran, and now let's backtrack just real quick, right? Let's go back, right? We're using an API from Todoist, and that API that we're using right now is a GET request. That API has a header in it, and that header is right the password, which is authorization. So I had to put in those credentials, and from there we have an output, right? And we have data. If I look right here and I see the status code, I see it's 200, which basically means that this was successful and there was no error. If I go and try to look at this, right, I get information back from here about the view and all those things and stuff like that. All I did was actually, I didn't specify anything crazy here. That's actually it. That was getting projects from there. And I actually really don't have any projects. I just have this education right here. And if I come back here, you can actually see that like education is right here. Now let's do another example for to do is if I go to projects once again and I go to creating a excuse me, a new project, I can come here and look at all the information that I need once again. So I need to grab this URL right here. Let's go ahead and just add another module. That's fine. I need to put this URL here. This method is not a get method anymore. It's a post method. And I need to put in the authorization again. Authorization. Let's just actually copy this from her. Body type must be raw. Content type must be JSON. Yeah. Okay, let's press OK. Let's come back here. Let's run this by itself. I got an error. Look at this. Name must be provided for the project creation. And that actually makes sense because I was skipping over something. So let's go back one more time. I have my URL. I have the rule, right, which is a post I'm creating. I have my name. I have my value. I have my content type. I have this right here. And literally what I forgot was to come here and grab this data because this data is very important. This data is actually, right, the body. This is the payload. This is what we're sending. So it actually creates something that we can use. Now I'm going to do a little trick here because obviously this gentleman doesn't want to cooperate. with uh, what's going on if this is wrong, and I'll show you, and I want to test this out real quick. So if I press OK, come back and try to run this is actually going to work and run. We see that there is a status code of 200. We see that it says data, and I can come here and look at this. Now if I come back here, we see that this now says shopping list, right? And if I change this to say anything like shopping merchandise, and then I run it and I come back, right? Shopping merchandise is also created. So we've made an API call, right? We've made an API call to basically create a new project, which is super simple and easy. All we did was come here to the documentation. We went to go look at a URL. We went to go look at what was the type of rule that we needed to follow. We also saw the data that we needed to put. We saw what was required of us to put inside of the header. So when we make this API call, we're basically able to get the information back and do all of those things like that. Now, the next part of also what's really important is something called a webhook. Now, a webhook is very similar to an API, but they are also very different. A webhook is a way for one system to automatically send real time data to another system when a specific event occurs. So let's say like somebody filled out a form and then I need to make a task that says like go check out whatever this person filled out and turn it into a task or whatever the case may be. So by definition, is it an automated communication mechanism triggering an action in one system when a specific event occurs? How it works. Applications send real-time data over the internet. A pre-defined event triggers a notification. You have use cases. Adding a new customer automatically sends an email or notification. And then one of the main differences between a webhook and an API is that because like since a webhook basically doesn't follow a set of rules, there is like no authentication or header needed majority of the time when you are using a webhook. It's very simple. You go to the automation platform that you're using, you grab the URL of the webhook, and you put that wherever you need it to go. So once said action happens, that will be sent somewhere else. Once again, just going over the difference between APIs and webhooks as URLs. APIs, you're usually requesting data, deleting data, updating data, or getting data, right? They're endpoints that you send requests to, and then a webhook is just a URL that receives data when something happens. And then next, I think the last part is that we're going to get into automation platforms where we kind of wrap all of this up together. So an automation platform is basically a platform that enables the creation of automatic workflows between different applications without needing coding, right? So automation platforms basically allow us to use APIs to create what's called an automatic workflow of multiple applications talking to each other through APIs. So the people who are not builders and stuff like that can easily go in there and not do what's on the right side and make an HTTP request. Now, let me actually make make this very clear of what's going on here. So inside of Make, the automation platform that I'm in, I am making an HTTP request. This is what you see here, but there actually are or there is a pre-built module of Todoist inside of here that already has API calls here. So I hope this makes sense. Every platform, especially in this day and age, has APIs. If you want to check if they have APIs, you can just go to the documentation of that platform. And if you see that documentation there, then you can kind of bet that there may be a pre-built module on an automation platform so you don't have to do that. So, once again, just to be clear, so nobody's lost, what do I mean by that? It means that instead of coming to the documentation to look at how to create a new project, uh, right? Instead of coming here and just grabbing this URL that has to do with create a new project, I can just come right here, and they actually don't have one for creating. Actually, nope, create a new project is right here, right? So I can actually just click this. Um, let's add a connection. I don't need to add that. Let's just press save. Right, let's agree. Right, and then this is asking like for the information to create the new project. So if I was to press example here and then run this by itself, it would say successful once again, and then we would see this example project right here. Now, to go back to this, what I was saying is like, what is an automation platform? Um, Automation platforms, and there are many. I named IFTT, and I want to make it very clear that IFTT is not a platform that you would be using to do these because it's very lackluster in those abilities. But you have many different platforms such as Zapier, Make, N8N, Pabbly, and all those other things. Um, Also, what I'm saying is, even though automation platforms have built modules and automated workflows, once again, it is very critical to be aware of like what APIs you're using, what technology, and all those other things like that, because it just makes working and things way more easier. I feel like you're able to scope out a lot of what you're going to need to do for your client and other things if you have that um, all set up. And you're going to move even faster if there's a module that's not there, but you need to go make and use an API call or an API request to basically, get the job done, which is super important. Now, actually, what I wanted to just briefly go over really quick, because I did go over a API. We did make one API call or two API calls, but I want to backtrack a little bit and go to a webhook because that webhook is very important, and we want to distinguish a webhook from an API. And once again, a webhook and an API, they're both URLs. They're just very different things. So for an example, if I come into Make, and you can do this in any automation platform, what I'm going to do is delete this module and create a new one, and it's going to be about webhooks, just really quick. Now, a webhook is a URL that can receive data, and I'll show you what that means. In almost any automation platform, you are able to add a custom webhook. Basically, what that means is that when this receives information, you can send data here. So I'm going to just press OK. I'm actually going to unlink. Oh. And then what I want to do, let's go back to do is create a project. I didn't. Okay, really quick. Unlink. Nope. There we go, right there. I can just press. I'm not going to press anything actually. So what's happening? This has a 1 here because I don't have this information filled out. But what I need to do with this webhook is that I need to redetermine the data structure. So as you can see, this is a URL right here, and I'm going to send information to that URL. So there is a wonderful platform called Postman. Postman is a platform that's free to use, and you can use this to test APIs, build APIs, and other things like that. What I'm going to be using this today is just to send information to a webhook to kind of show you guys how easy this is. So you want to make sure that the command is post. Now, granted, I said earlier that webhooks don't really follow these commands, but when it comes to a webhook sending information, it's basically following like that host protocol type thing. Okay, so let's come here and we need to grab this URL and we need to paste it here. We see that it says post, and what I want to do is send very basic information here. Now, if you remember when we were talking about API calls, we were talking about a JSON object, we talked about key values and things like that. And inside of here, it's kind of, you'll notice the same thing. So we have our URL, we have the type of API request that we're doing, and then we have a name, right? And we have a key. So here, all I can do is type in name, email, and then we're gonna just do an example of this course. It's gonna be the API course. So I could just put course, and then I meant to put API. So what's gonna happen is I'm gonna press send, and this is gonna send this information into this webhook so it can determine the structure, so it knows basically the format of data of what's going to be coming in. So I can come back here, press send. We see that this was accepted. We also see that there's a 200 right here, going back to what I was talking about earlier with the status results that you get and stuff like that. So this now says successfully determined. I don't know if you saw that, but it was spinning. If I press OK and then press this to run by itself once again, and I press send, come back, we can actually see that information right here. So it says Thailand at Otaku Solutions, and then API. Now, okay, we have sent information to a webhook, right? Now, let's use that same information to make an API call. And this can be very simple. The name, right? So what happens is, let me come back here. Oh, do I not have any? Okay. So sorry for that technical kind of error. Let's do that. Create a project. And what I wanted to do was be able to map this information that's right here, just in case anything happens to me. So now what's happening is that I'm sending information to the webhook, and the webhook uses that information as what's called variables. And then I'm able to map that information, right, into another API call in order to make it look like he did it or whatever the case may be. So if I actually press run, because this is going to wait for information, and then I'm going to send, same thing, I'm going to just keep it simple. So this messed up here, which is fine. That could mean 400 was actually something that I did. This says project ID. let's see. Yeah, I'm putting something wrong right here. Um, I'm not gonna troubleshoot through that right now. Maybe I should save that for another video because I'm sorry. So I was actually getting a project and not creating a project. I thought I pressed create a project. So let's maybe try that again. Name. Let's run this. Press send. And then that was created. Wow, that's super cool, cool. We can see Thailand right here. Um, wow, I'm trying to think. Is there anything else that I'm missing? Because I don't want to say I don't want to get too technical or go too overboard or anything like that, but I think this gives a very good kind of overview. And I want to talk about like automation and AI in your business, right? Because I think that this kind of sometimes is a little more complicated than it needs to be. And what helped me, especially when I ended up becoming a make partner, is that they give you these examples that are very clear to look throughout an organization. And this is the same for almost any organization, is that they have a finance section, a support section, a custom integration section, IT, HR, marketing, sales, and the product that they're selling, right? Those are the things that I would say that you should definitely be thinking about when it comes to automating. There are some people who can um, do them all, right? So I've been in automation for a long time that I've actually worked across all of these different sections. And then there are some people who only want to specialize in maybe one, two, or three, or maybe just one. And nothing's wrong with that. Those are all great. They're always going to be an open market and have money and all these other things. Automations are not going away anytime soon. I know there's a lot of hype, but every day the need will continue to rise because there's going to be new business owners, if that makes sense. And a lot of, I feel like, yeah, anyway, moving on from that, I just thought that that was very important. So I want to recap. Hopefully, this has been a great video. I won't lie, I haven't been asleep in 24 hours. But what I wanted to do was make a very clear, straightforward video on APIs and webhooks. I want to talk about some things really quick that I think are important. Whenever you're learning a new skill like automations and AI, it's going to be filled with a journey of up and downs. That's normal, just like anything new that you're learning. You're not going to automatically get it or fast forward in Excel. That is not a common use case. Also, embrace your errors. There are a lot of people who get upset when they run into errors or when they have to troubleshoot, which kind of is not good. That's a part of the natural learning process, and you always have an opportunity to grow. Don't be afraid to experiment and build. Even if you make mistakes, you will gain invaluable experience, and that experience, almost nothing can beat that type of experience once you get it. It's crazy. If you can't keep up with the constant tech technological advancements, consider partnering with someone who has the expertise. This is really important. So there were the other type of people that I talked about who are marketers, and marketers don't need to be building at all. They need to be focusing on their product and making sales and doing all these other things. So if you know that basically you're not going to be a builder or that's not what you want to do, I would highly consider partnering with somebody to make all of those things easier. So much easier instead of trying to do it yourself. Um, Staying adaptable and open to learning. You learn something new every day. I would be a fool to tell you that I think that I'm the most smartest person and all these other things because I've been in the world of automation for 15 years. It just doesn't work like that. Do I think I have a lot of experience and I can definitely give great perspectives towards the average person who has just started their automation journey? Definitely. But once again, that doesn't mean I'm better than them or anything like that. And then One of the other ones I would say is like, don't be afraid to take it to Chat GPT to ask questions. I see people ask Chat GPT like everything. But maybe when it comes to this specific thing, like people are kind of scared, or I really don't know what it is, but I would highly encourage that, because once again, you'll be surprised about how far you get and how good those answers are, or whatever the case may be. Um, I think that is it for this video. I hope that this was valuable. I hope this kind of gave a different perspective. This will be a series. Like I said, I've come to the conclusion that I don't think that I can talk about anything related to automations and AI without having a video that goes over the basics of an API request and a webhook, because that's all we're going to be using when we're building these crazy automation workflows. My name is Tylen Miller. I hope you have a wonderful day and go automate something cool, guys. Thank you.